Hi, welcome to day 5 of digital learning. This is now all on Google Classroom, so everything that you can submit, you can do directly on Google Classroom. You don't have to email or text it to me. It could just go right with the assignment by you submitting. Either you could take a picture of your work or you could do it just right on that website. So today we are going to continue our work with fractions, and today we're going to be starting to use a number line to represent our fractions. So here's a number line that goes from 0 to 2. So let's say they're city blocks. And a city block is a distance between one street to another street. So one block is from 0 to 1, and another block starts from 1 to 2. So again, I'm going to say a city block is basically just how our streets are separated. So going from one street to the next street, and then the next street to the next street. So these are our city blocks. So let's say an ant is going to travel along these two blocks, starting at 0, ready to go, and then the ant decides to go half a block at a time, resting after each half block. So this is one block, and this is another block. So if my ant traveled half a block and then rest, where would the ant be? Take a second to think about if my ant traveled half of a block, where would the ant be? If you said that he would be right here, you're right, because he's going from, this is all one block, and he stops halfway between getting to the next block. What number would we want to put where he stopped? It's not a full or a whole. It's not a whole block. It's only half of the block. So what number should we put at the mark where that ant stops to rest? He has traveled what fraction of one block? I want you to talk to a parent right now and think about what fraction of one block has the ant traveled. He's traveled 1/2. So I put 1/2. That's half of my block. So now the ant walks another half block and rests. Where would he be now? He stopped halfway here. Now he's going to walk another half block. So we'd be at the 1 on the number line. But we're asking how many half blocks the ant has gone. How many half blocks? He went 1/2 block here. Now he's gone on, he's done another one. So he's done 2 half blocks. And there's 2 parts that make up my whole block, my 1. So right now I'm showing how to break up my number line in half. And remember that if a number is over itself, so 2 over 2 is equal to 1, or a whole. Has as many parts as it needs to fill the whole. So right now I'm showing that my ant has traveled 2 half blocks. What if the ant decided that he's gonna keep going a half a block at a time? So right now he's still here. Where would his next stopping point be? Pause me, talk to a parent or sibling, or write it down. Where do you think the next part would he stop at if he was stopping at the half block? You said right there in the middle. You're right, because he went 1/2 here, another half here, and another half here. So what would I label? How many half blocks has he gone so far? Let's think. So He's gone 1, 2, 3 half blocks. But what's my denominator of my whole? What is one whole? How many parts? One whole is 2 parts. So my denominator is going to stay as 2. What I want you to do now is think about, what does 3 halves mean? I really want you to talk to a parent or a sibling and think about, what does 3 halves mean? So how I would think of 3 halves is that since I have 2 parts that make up my whole, one is my whole, I'm just adding another part, but not changing the amount that I have. I'm not changing my whole. My whole is still 1, but I have more than 1. Because he went 1, 2, 3 halves, so 3 over 2. So if he went another half of a block, where would he be then? He would be right here at the 2. What would my fraction be to show that? If this is 3 over 2, I know my denominator is still going to stay 2 because that's how many parts of my whole. You went 1, 2, 3, 4 half blocks. I want us to go back to the beginning of the number line. When the ant was just starting, how many half blocks had it gone? So if I'm back at the beginning of my number line, how many half blocks has it gone so far? I want you to think about it. How many half blocks has the ant gone so far? He has gone 0 half blocks. My denominator is going to stay the same right now. 0 half blocks. So I have 0, then 1 part, or 1 half block, 2 half blocks, 3 half blocks, and 4 half blocks. So here's another number line underneath that also goes from 0 to 2. And I want us to remember that this is one city block and this is another city block. So there are 2 city blocks. This time, they only walks 1/3 of a block at a time and then rests. He gets so tired, he can't even walk a full half. He can only walk 1/3 of a block before he has to rest. Where would his first stopping point be? And what should we label it? Think about, where would my first stopping point be if I was to do 1/3? So I know that here, this is my whole, so I need to separate it into thirds. So my first part that he would stop at would be 1/3 of the way to my whole 1 block. What would I label my third? I would label it 1/3. There will be 3 parts because I'm breaking it up into thirds, and he's done 1/3. What would be my next part that my ant stops at? My next third of a block. So walking a little bit more, and then I need to break it up into 2/3. He would stop right about here. And it's okay if it's not perfect, but I want to do my best to make sure that it's as equal as possible between my break between 1/3, now 2/3, and now I'm going, he needs to stop at his next third. My ant's so tired he needs to stop at my next third, which is my one whole block. What would my fraction be if I was going to say that he's now stopping at my whole block? It would be 3/3. He's now went 1 block or 1/3 and stopped. He stopped at 2/3, and now he stopped at 3/3. And what I want us to make sure that we notice is that I don't have 3 lines, but I have 3 parts here. So now we finish up with 1 block. What's going to be my next third that I'm going to stop, that my ant is going to stop at? He'll stop right about here. My next third. Now I want us to think 3/3, and now he goes 1 more third, so it'd be 4/3. And again, I want to repeat that my numerator is bigger than my denominator because it's more than 1 whole. Now where am I going to stop? I go a little bit more. I know, a little bit more, and now my ant's tired. Going to stop at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 thirds. It's going to go a little bit more to get to my second block. What would my denominator and numerator be, or my fraction be, for this last stop that he made, that last resting point? It would be 6/3. And again, I'm going to check. So this is 1 whole. This is another whole, but I'm continuing on. So I see that here I have 1, 2, 3 parts, and still 1, 2, 3 parts. I need to make sure that my number line is broken up into the amount of parts, or my whole, that it says. So it's broken up into 1, 2, 3 parts, and 1, 2, 3 parts. I want us to think about really quickly, why wouldn't I say that this is 6/6? Think about it for a second. I wouldn't want to say it's 6/6 because this is more than just 1 whole. This is 2 blocks. So I need to keep it the same as my whole. My whole 1 block is broken up into 3 parts. So at this point, what I would like you to do is work on pages 356 and 357. You can find those workbook pages on the same assignment tab that you found this video, and also the same tab that you found this seashell word problem that you had to do at the beginning before we started this lesson. So please pause the video, go to the assignment tab and open up that link, and I'll explain all the directions. So at this point, you should have already completed pages 356 and 357, but I just wanted us to quickly go over number 3 together, just so that I have it on the board, and also that way you can check your work and think about maybe pausing me and fixing something if maybe you didn't do it correctly the first time. So if you look at number 3, it says that he's going to be going and stopping at 1/8 of every city block. What I want us to do is I'm going to split up my 8 parts first before I label anything. That way I make sure that they're going to be equal, and that in order to be a fraction, remember, it needs to be equal parts. So I'm going to split up my first block, because that's my 1 whole, by putting a line in the middle, because I know that's going to be 4/8 or 1/2. And then I'm going to also separate it in the middle like this. And the reason I'm putting it in half of my half is because now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 parts, but I know I need 8. So I'm going to break up right here, in the middle of these two, in the middle of these two, in the middle. And now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 parts. And I'm not counting the lines I just made. I'm counting the parts in between. So if I started, my ant started, and he hasn't gone anywhere yet, what would my fraction be? He has not even moved. It'd be 0/8 because he just started. He has not moved, he hasn't done anything, he hasn't completed any of the parts. I'm actually going to switch right over to this side, might be easier. My next fraction would be where he stopped, would be my 1/8, my first part. So my 1 part. Now I go to my next, be 2/8. My next part that he would stop would be 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 5/8, 6/8, and 7/8. And I know that, and I could double check my work by counting the parts in between. So he goes this much, it's 1 part. Goes this much, it's 2 parts. This much, 3 parts. This much, 4 parts. And I want us to pay attention to my 4/8 because it looks pretty similar or equivalent to 1/2. Then 5/8, 6/8, 7/8. And now I get to my 1 whole block. I would say, how many parts made up my whole? 8. The numerator and the denominator are the same. That is a whole, or 1. Now I'm going to split up to my next city block the same way I did it with my first. So you can pause me now, and if you want to double check your work and do it the same way I just did, you can do that. But I know 8 can be divided by 2, so I have 2 parts. I'm going to split it up right here into 4ths. And then I'm going to put it in the middle like that. And in order I'm doing that just that way, I make sure that all of my parts are equal. So 8/8, and now he goes 1 more 1/8. And I know that 8 plus 1 is 9/8, then 10/8, 11/8, 12/8, and I could check 9, 10, 11, 12, 13/8, 14/8, 15/8, and what is when he gets to my second city block? How many 8ths is that now? 15 plus 1 is 16/8. A way that I could check my work is figuring out what is 16 divided by 8. It's 2. So it's the same whole. So it's the same as having 2 wholes. So yesterday we talked about equivalent fractions. And just as a quick review, equivalent fractions are fractions that are equal to each other, that are the same amount. They might have different numerators and denominators, but they're equal, and we figured that out using a fraction bar. So we remember that 1/2 is equal to 3/6 and 1/3 is equal to 2/6. Different numerators and denominators, but they're equal. And not only did we figure that out with the fraction bar, but we also figured it out by using our pattern blocks yesterday. So we can also use a number line to figure out equivalent fractions. I'm going to put this down. We marked 1/2 right here, halfway between 0 and 1. Are there other fractions marked halfway between 0 and 1 on the number lines that you divided into fourths, eighths, third, or sixth. I want you to pause me and think about what other fractions that you broke up were halfway between 0 and 1. So what I see is that 2/4 is halfway between 0 and 1. So I'm going to write 2/4 because I know that they're equivalent because they're both halfway between 0 and 1. Now I want you to think of other ones that you also notice are halfway between 0 and 1. Also notice that 4/8 is halfway between 0 and 1. I have the same amount on both sides. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 parts, and 1, 2, 3, 4 parts. So it's halfway. It's in the middle of 0 and 1. Just like I noticed that 3/6 is halfway through between 0 and 1. It has 1, 2, 3 parts on that side, and 1, 2, 3 parts on that side. So it's exactly in the middle. So what I can do on our sheet, add some more equivalent fractions. So I want us to think, what is one equivalent fraction that we just figured out that I can write? I can write that 1/4 is equal to 1/2. And yesterday we already figured out that 3/6 was. I could write down that, I wrote 1/2 because I know that 1/4 isn't equivalent or the same as 1/2. I accidentally wrote the wrong number. So 2/4 is equal to 1/2. And I can also write what else? And since I know that all of them are the same, I can also write 4/8 is equivalent to 1/2 and 2/4. Or what's a reason that I can figure out that 1/3 is not equivalent to 1/2? That they're both not the same because 1/3 or 2/3 isn't directly in the middle or half of my number line. So what we just did is we used a number line to figure out equivalent fractions. One way that I can check my work, maybe I'm not exactly sure if they're equivalent fractions, is what I showed you yesterday using a fraction bar. So I'm going to quickly go over just 2 ways, or just 2 fractions that I can check using my fraction bar. And in order that we need to make sure, to compare equivalent fractions, we need to make sure our whole is the same amount. Just like how my city block is the same throughout, my fraction bar needs to be the same. So what I'm going to do here is split up this fraction bar to 4/8 and this fraction bar to 3/6. So 4/8, I know that I would do what as my denominator? How many parts am I going to split up my fraction bar? So in order to do that, remember I'm going to put my line down the middle, and this is making sure that my parts are equal. And then another line here. And now I just separate it into fourths. Now I'm going to separate it into eighths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 equal parts. And I'm going to shade in 1, 2, 3, 4. So the easiest way that I'm making up my parts is making it into the middle, splitting up the middle first. That way or splitting into thirds, that way I make sure that I have equal parts. So for 3/6, I know 3 can be, or 6 can be divided by 2. So I'd make it into 2 parts, but I know now that I have to split it up into 3 parts on each side. So how many am I going to shade in for 3/6? Shaded 1, 2, 3. And that's another way that I just figured out or checked my work to see how 4/8 is equal to 3/6 because they have the same amount shaded on my fraction bar and also on my number line. So what we just did together is figure out how to show fractions using a number line. Along with that is also we figured out and saw a different way that we can compare equivalent fractions. So fractions that are equal. So at this point, you should have submitted pages 356 and 357 onto Google Classroom, and also submitted the seashell word problem that we'll be going over tomorrow.